welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada, we love you. In Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on the beautiful 6th of June, 2019. Bruno Deportes and Big C will be traveling, doing some traveling tonight. I think he may have had too many libations from watching the Golden State and the Toronto Raptors battle last night in Oakland, California. But it's all fair and love and war. And I want to bring you a lot of, obviously, appreciation for what we have with all the celebrations going on around the world with D-Day, and just celebrating our veterans and saying how grateful we are as a nation. No one can get here on their own. We had to have people go to battle, and many of them gave their lives fighting for this great country. So really appreciate bringing that to the sports universe as well. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. As we always say on the Big C Sports Show, we always talk about no excuse for domestic violence, but also just being brought to my attention by so many people who are dealing with issues, whether it's veterans or whether it's just kids who are out of school now, and a lot of times they need supervision. They need someone to stand up and say, it's okay, you can call me if you have a problem. If you're a parent, sometimes you think they're going to call you, but sometimes kids don't talk to their parents. So whether you're a military veteran and going through some issues, or a regular everyday citizen, or even a teenager that's dealing with being bullied, there's an 800 number you can call. It's free. It's called the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. You can call 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And that way, hopefully you can get some help. And we want to make sure that people can feel safe. And sometimes you can do that when you know there's a place to go when you need help. I want to just start briefly. We'll get into the Golden State Warriors game a little bit later. We know that was a big event last night in Oakland, and a really big event for the Toronto Raptors, because teams that are the winners of Game 3, they win 81% of the NBA Finals, especially when you have a Warriors team that's beaten up and banged up. I know there's some talk that Klay Thompson's going to play in Game 4, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. You do have to cross the bridge. A lot of the people, know it or not, when they come to San Francisco, they actually stay and they stay in San Francisco, and they'll play games in Oakland, so they'll go across the bay and make that drive over to Oakland to the Coliseum. But I want to start tonight with the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're in Boston, and the series is tied. No one really expected it to be tied. If you look at this series over the years, Boston's been the more dominant franchise, obviously winning multiple Stanley Cups. The Bruins 49-24-9, their season record, and then the Blues 45-28-9. But right around the beginning of the season, or the beginning of the year, they were the worst team in the NHL. So it shows that anyone has a chance to win, and that's important for the St. Louis Blues. I know not many people gave them the opportunity that they would play well enough to compete with Boston coming in. For the fact that they got past San Jose, I think that was a big turning point for them, because San Jose was hot after knocking off Las Vegas. So the thoughts of Charles playing, anytime decision already underway. We don't like to give out scores, but he did suffer a broken jaw after being hit by a puck on Monday. Now, there's players in each conference final, whether it's NHL or EA, that are dealing with some pain. So whether if you start him, is it really helpful for him? Because you don't want the man to have another injury. Anyone can get hit by a puck, and it causes a lot of problems. I just hope that he's going to be okay. So the series will lean either to Boston or it will lean to St. Louis tonight. You got to go with Boston just because they're at home. They're going to have that home crowd behind them at TD Gardens. Just the history of trying to go into Boston and take a game may be too much for anyone to overcome. We wish St. Louis the best, but you never know. It's all about who plays best and what game. That there may be some pressure off of St. Louis because they play better on the road, and we'll see what happens with that. as we go forward in the World Cup Championship. I want to bring up what happened last night in Golden State, because there's so much conventional wisdom that if Coach Kerr decided to sit Klay Thompson, that Golden State would have a better chance to win this series if it goes full, like 7 games, or maybe even 6. It could still go 6 games, but would it be Golden State winning? Because if you don't have Looney, which he's expected to maybe make a comeback in this series, but if you don't have Klay Thompson, you're missing half the Splash Brothers. That's like swimming with one hand, and you need both of them because they can move around on the floor a lot, and it really opens up passing lanes. Will Kevin Durant come back and play? I don't know. You can't really count on Kevin Durant coming back to play, because even if Durant comes back and plays in this series, will he have anything to offer? Because he's going to be out of shape. He hasn't played in over 30 games. Over 30 days. So you think about that shot that we saw him hit in this series, before he pulled the injury in his leg. We don't know if he's really able to get up and down the court or not, because he can't play and stop someone like Kawhi Leonard if he's not full strength. So I don't know if that's going to be a factor or not, but they do need Klay Thompson. And I'll just say, I picked Golden State to win it in 6 games, that they would win it at Oracle Arena. But if they don't have a full lineup that's capable of competing at an NBA level, especially when you're playing a team like the Toronto Raptors, then I don't see how Golden State wins. It's just too difficult. If you look at Kawhi Leonard, how he has to be there, Lowry has to be there, Gasol has to play well for Toronto to have a chance, and they're doing that. So if you still have this thought that Klay Thompson's going to miraculously come back into the game and play Game 4 at Oracle, if he's not 100%, no one is, but he has to be about 75, 80%, because he still has to pull up on those threes that he can get without even a dribble. You need that. So what's going to be the turning point for Golden State? You got to have Klay Thompson more so than you got to have Durant, because he at least has his ability to run up and down the court. Durant, even if he's given the okay sign, the green light, there's no guarantee that he's healthy enough or even in shape. We saw what happened with DeMarcus Cousins, and how Cousins struggled because he wasn't in shape. And last night he had a horrible game after having a solid game 2. But that's what happens when you're out of shape. So what's the difference between Cousins and also Durant? Both guys right now, they cannot be in game shape. So I just don't know how Golden State's going to pull it off. I would still hope that they could win it, because I'm a big Northern California guy, more so than Toronto. I know people say you shouldn't be partial in the media, but we know what happens. Klay Thompson plays 70%. Steph Curry's about 90-95%. But even if you look at the Toronto Raptors, they have to have Kawhi Leonard carry the load for that team. I know Green came off the bench and hit some threes. Lowry was knocking down threes last night. But it's still about Leonard. Everything goes through Leonard. Now, if you take away the top player for Toronto, that's Leonard, then Toronto doesn't have a chance. The top player might be Durant for Golden State. But we've seen that even without him playing, that Curry, he's been able to carry that team. So you got to have Curry healthy, you got to have Draymond Green healthy, and you got to have Thompson. Without Thompson, the Warriors are not going to win this series, whether people talk about having a 6 or 7 game series. So I want to get your thoughts if you are an athlete. Klay Thompson said he could play. Coach Kerr said, no, we don't want to play him because the doctor said no. Now, we all know there are doctors and then there's players. No one can tell you whether you can go or not but a player. And the idea that everyone has to be 100%, it doesn't make sense for any sport, because no one's 100%, especially in football or even in basketball for that matter. So I don't know why Kerr would override Klay Thompson. Let's be real. There's talk that Klay Thompson has a big payday coming up, that he may not even be on the Golden State Warriors roster next year. I think that would be a mistake. I would love to see Golden State keep Klay Thompson. I think everybody knows that they need him. And whether he's going to stay in Oakland or San Francisco next year or not, the Golden State Warriors are a much better team with them. If you're going to lose a player, let it be Durant. Because they've won a championship without Durant, but they haven't won a championship without Klay Thompson. And I think that's important for Golden State going forward. But if you are a player and you're saying that you can go, and then you have a coach saying, well, no, we're not going to start him because we're going to save him for what? For the team he's going to play for next year? If it's not you? I would just hope that if you are a player that you have more stake in your health than some coach that may not even have you as a player next year. So I know there's this thing on prop betting. There's a thing on, who's going to sit out a player to make the series more exciting because you need TV interest up. And everyone wants to see the champion get knocked off, whether it's the New England Patriots being knocked off. People want to see that. If you are the New York Yankees, when they were winning World Series, it seemed like every other year, people tune in to see them get knocked off. So will ratings be higher to see Golden State be, decrowned for the championship, looking for their 4th title in 5 years? I think they're going to watch no matter what. But I just don't agree, and every player and coach can have their own opinion. I don't know any healthy players this time of year. But if you have a player, the Splash Brother, that's telling you, Coach, I can go, I can do it, I don't know why you would pull him out of the game. Just to say that we want to save him for the next game. Well, you're down 2-1. So even if you win game 2, if you win the second game at home, and you have the series tied at 2 apiece, you still got to have the advantage of going to Toronto and having a chance to win that game. There's no guarantee that they could do that. So I don't know why you wouldn't give everything you have to keep home court advantage at Oracle Arena in Oakland by playing Klay Thompson. You're just giving that game away. You could see last night that they could not make shots, and Curry dropped 47 points, but he did that on his own. So now what you've done by having Curry play really more than he should have played, I think he only sat out about 4 minutes. He dropped 47 points. Even in his warm-ups, he didn't warm up as much as he normally does. So now you're going to have a Curry that may be a little bit fatigued if you bring him back and play him the same amount of minutes that you played him in Game 3. So he's going to have to take some minutes off to keep his legs under him, because 47 points and then follow that up with another 47-point night, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's going to happen. So Coach Kerr's the one with the championships. He's the one with the titles. But at some point in time, you got to ask your players if they can go. I think it was Scherzer that was on the mound in a Major League Baseball game, and his manager came out and said, we got to pull you. And he said, no, I can still go. And he ended up helping his team win. I just think that's important. At some point in time, you got to start trusting your players. It can't just be the coach, and it can't just be the coaching staff saying that we want to get this guy out of here because he's not 100%. I don't know anyone who's 100% right now. But that's part of what happens in the world of baseball. That's what happens in the world of football. And we know that's what happened last night with Golden State. I just think that hurt them by not having them in there. And I would want to see if they're going to change that coming up in the next part of the series, which is going to start Friday night, Oakland, California. We'll see if Klay Thompson's going to play, and we'll see if Kerr keeps him in there, and we'll know what happens by the time we close out on Friday night. And now, after that talk about whether Klay Thompson can play or if he should not have played, if you end up going down 3-1, the next series is over. I know Draymond Green said they're going to come back and win Game 4, Game 5, Game 6, and they're going to close out in Oakland. That they're going to go 3 in a row because they're going to have Klay Thompson back. That Kerr thinks is wounded, but Thompson thinks he's okay. So we just really have to wait and see that. Toronto's been playing great. I thought they forced Golden State to defend the 3 because they were knocking down 3-point baskets, and they were driving the basket early. They got Golden State in foul trouble. In the first minute and 12 seconds, I believe, Golden State already had committed 2 fouls. And that's a shame when you're on the home court. You think you get home cooking, but that didn't happen. So we'll see what happens with Coach Kerr and holding Klay Thompson out. But you got to give all the credit to the Toronto Raptors. They get the 123-109 win. They're up 2-1 in the finals. And in Jurassic Park, they have a lot to celebrate. They have a lot to be happy for. Because even if they lose this, Golden State has to come back and win 3 out of a possible 4 games remaining. Toronto only has to win 2 out of 2. But as athletes will tell you, they just have to win the game in front of them. So that's what gives you hope if you're still Golden State. But if you're Toronto, you can play 50% ball and you can win a championship, an NBA championship. If you go to State, you got to win at a 75% clip. So Curry drops 47 points in Game 3. They lose to Toronto, and it's tough for it. They're going uphill now. If you've ever been to the Bay, there's a lot of currents under the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, swimming in currents is a lot more difficult than swimming when the water's smooth. So we'll see what happens in that series coming up on Friday. Should be at Madhouse again at Oracle Arena. And just keep in mind, there's only possibly 2 more games left at Oracle. 2 more. And Golden State has to win both of them. They have to finish out undefeated at Oracle. Can they do that with the wounded crew? Well, we'll see. I don't think they can if they're wounded. If they have Thompson back, even if he's 70%, I think they can. I want to ask everyone this question. We all go to games. We all want to pay money and go see our favorite teams play. We want to see our favorite players play. And sometimes if you have money, it takes a lot of money to sit courtside. We've seen the antics of Drake up in Toronto. I really think Drake has been, he's a celebrity. He's an entertainer. So he's going to make noise like anybody else. And because he is Drake, it gets a lot of attention. I don't agree with him challenging players, but that's just part of his personality, and the league doesn't seem to mind it as much as they could. So I won't even get into that. But when you look at Golden State Warriors, they have an investor by the name of Mark Stevens. He was wearing a blue shirt, and when Kyle Lowry dove into the sideline and into the front row of fans that were sitting there, Mark Stevens in a blue shirt, he pushed Kyle Lowry. Now, you should never put your hands on an athlete. We saw what happened with Russell Westbrook up in Salt Lake City, and that was just by a fan that had said some pretty sullen things to Westbrook, didn't put his hands on him, and then Westbrook got fined because he was retaliating verbally to the fan. Now, I want to get everyone's thought. If you are an owner, whether you're a millionaire or not, you should never put your hands on a player. Now, before I saw the replay, I was thinking, well, what do you want the guy on the sideline to do, not knowing who he was at that time, Mr. Stevens? If someone's falling into you, of course you put your hands up and try to protect yourself or your family or whoever you're sitting with. And that's what I thought had happened. So I thought Lowry was overreacting when I first saw it on television. But I've seen the replays like everybody else. And what I've seen was a fan, because you are a fan, even though he's an owner, he's an investor owner with the Golden State Warriors. Well, he's been fined $500,000 and banned from the games for 1 year because Mark Stevens is his name. He shoved Kyle Lowry in Game 3. But I don't think it was the shove as much that got him fined the $500,000 and also banned for 1 year. I don't know what he said to Lowry. But again, if you can equate it with what happened with the fan in Salt Lake City for the Utah Jazz against Russell Westbrook with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So we don't know what was said, but it was a threatening gesture that investor made Mark Stevens toward Kyle Lowry. And I want to ask anyone who follows sports, if you saw the time that we saw the fight with Metta World Peace in Indiana, where the fans came down. So this is not the same thing, obviously. There were no punches being thrown. But is a push deserved of a year's suspension from the games and even a $500,000 fine? Russell Westbrook, even though it was only verbal, I think he was fined $25,000. But a $500,000 is sending a really stern example to your fan base of what not to do. And I want to know if people think that was egregious. I think it may have been a little bit too much. Now, I don't agree with anyone touching a player. I just don't. But I don't know what was said. And I think $500,000 for saying the wrong thing is a big fine to pay. And that's up to Commissioner Adam Silver. I know he's run a really tough ship here in the NBA. And a lot of people respect him. I know he got into Doc Rivers for even talking about Kyrie Irving. Not Kyrie Irving, but Kawhi Leonard. About maybe how good of a player he was, and said that was tampering. We know that Magic Johnson got in trouble because he talked about Davis and how he was a great player. And then so Silver came down really hard on those guys. But when it comes to fans, I thought $500,000 is egregious. I don't know what he said, but I don't know any words that are worth $500,000. Now, if Stevens had thrown a punch, I can see, of course, a year ejection. I can see if he thrown a punch with it, but he didn't throw a punch. Ron Artest changed his name, Metta World Peace, maybe some PR behind that, but he threw a punch at the fan. I remember that very vividly. This was a totally different situation, but I also know alcohol comes into play, and I'm sure when you're sitting in the front row, you have access to drinks and alcohol, and I know that may have had a lot to do with it also. But I just wonder if he were a regular 9-to-5 person, there's no way they would hit him with a $500,000 fine. No way at all. And maybe a year suspension, I would understand. So everybody has their own opinion about that. I don't know personally either of the players. or the gentlemen sitting in the seats. But that's just something that I think the commissioner could expound on more. But I know that everybody, you have to know you can't touch a player. If you're defending yourself, that's one thing. So we'll see what happens if that affects anyone in Game 4. I think it's a must-win, of course, without saying for Golden State. This is their Game 7 on Friday night. So I don't understand still why Coach Kerr decided to keep a player on the sideline that said, I can play. That's just bizarre to me. I also want to get into something else that's a little bit, it could be tabloidish, but it happened. When you look at one of the, and I don't want to give the name of the lady, but the wife of one of the owners sitting next to Jay-Z and Beyonce was getting some threats on a Twitter page, on social media. And I think that's horrible. So the interaction, she was asking Jay-Z, because the Warriors invited them to sit front side if he wanted something to drink. And so leaning in front of Beyonce. And again, I don't like the hearsay, but I just know that it made the news in the Bay Area and even nationwide. And I just wonder why. And I know people talk about Drake. Well, Beyonce didn't do anything wrong. And I think for someone to say that she looked a certain way and therefore people who follow her were hating on one of the wives of one of the owners, well, they were guests there. And I know sometimes we could take one story and spread it a long way. I would hate that would happen to Beyonce as an entertainer, just like Drake's an entertainer. And sometimes we can make someone who goes to a game too much of the story. It wasn't Beyonce that pushed Kyle Lowry. It was Mark Stevens. But to have her name come up in that, and I don't know what happened, so maybe I'm the foolish person here, but I hate to see our entertainers being made the enemy of sporting events, because that really is not what we want to see. That's just my opinion. That's my 2 minutes on it, and I'll stand by it. I want to look at the world of Major League Baseball. We have a pretty big schedule tonight. You have Houston, they're playing at Seattle. Minnesota's playing at Cleveland. You have the New York Yankees playing at Toronto. And in Toronto, what can you say about Toronto? That city of about 7 million people in the metropolitan area, they are really carrying the torch of the athletic world, and especially for Canada, our home and native land. So you look at Toronto, the Raptors, how they really lit the torch. But also, you have the Blue Jays. They've won World Series back in the 90s, and here they are playing the Yankees, which have their own history of championships. So they're going to take a backseat to the Raptors, obviously. Baltimore is at Texas. You have the Oakland A's at the LA Angels. Washington is at San Diego, and then some makeup games. You have San Francisco Giants at New York Mets. Atlanta's at Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay is at Detroit. Boston at Kansas City. Cincinnati at St. Louis, and then Miami is at Milwaukee, as well as Colorado's at Chicago. So Major League Baseball, I think it's in a great state if, and I say a big if they can decide that they're going to do right by it. Manfred should not have said that they're not going to put up this nets around the stadium, at least the infill from foul pole to foul pole. That would keep the players and the fans in a better situation when players go to work. They don't have to worry about a kid being hit by a foul ball. I know they say, well, it's a parent's responsibility. That's part of it too. But if you're a league, sometimes you have to protect people from themselves. I think that's important, and I would love to see Manfred come back and decide that they are going to put up that net, keep people from hurting themselves by maybe being on their cell phones and not paying attention. But you don't want to see a fan get injured, especially a little kid, and we know that's happened. As we go to Major League Baseball and you look at some of the power rankings, again, everybody has their opinion. Now the Dodgers, I like the Dodgers just because they've been one of the hottest teams in baseball. And I think what happens sometimes is people go by the record of a team. And we'll say, well, the team with the best record is the hottest team in the sport. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a team that's just playing better. And I think the Dodgers are doing that right now. One of the things that makes the Dodgers offense so tough and why they are the new number one, I think, besides Cody Bellinger, who's been brilliant the first 2 months. But heading into the Sunday, they led the National League in walks. The Cubs had, I think, the slight edge in that per game. But I really love what the Dodgers are doing. And I think David Freese and Alex Verdugo, they're excellent. I really love the way the Dodgers are playing. Can they get into the World Series again? They may be. But when you look at Verdugo, he's hitting 300. It's going to be difficult to knock out that lineup that the Dodgers bring. The number 2 team, and I would love to see a Yankees and Dodgers World Series. I don't know if we're ever going to see that, but it would be wonderful for baseball, the universe of baseball, to see a Yankees versus Dodgers in the World Series. I would love to see that, especially with Vin Scully still around and following Dodgers baseball. I look at the Yankees after taking the weekend series from the Red Sox. That's their big game in Major League Baseball. Maybe the best rivalry game of all of Major League Baseball, seeing the Yankees and the Red Sox. But think about what the Yankees bring to the bat. They've captured 9 in a row, and they have 6 home runs all season from Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Hicks. That trio combined for 92 homers last season. You think about the bullpen, they continue to dominate. You have Chapman, who I think a guy that can throw 100 miles per hour as a savior is just amazing. Zach Britton is also good. And so I like them. Their combined 1.51 ERA makes the Yankees very tough. And we know they can hit the ball. They're the number one team, I think, as far as hitting. A team that no one can really look past, the Houston Astros. I love what the Astros bring. And I really think when you look at how strong they've been, we always think about their defensive play. They're very solid. I look at what they've done and against some of the top teams in the league. Even with injuries mounting for Houston, we have Marcinek started 22 games in the center field since April 29th. I mean, everybody knows that his responsibilities have been expanded. His skill set is not the best, but he's still good. He has a 442 slugging percentage. And I just like Houston being the team that can keep playing. They have that dome, so they can always control the environment that they play in. Looking forward to them to keep pushing to get back into the World Series. I know they'll probably be there. They were one of the younger teams 2 years ago. They were built by the draft, and it got them there. Minnesota Twins, small market. I like what the Twins are doing. They have not faced a division favorite in the Indians since the opening series, and they took 2 or 3 games in that series. You look about their ace, Jose Barrios, scheduled for a Wednesday start in Cleveland. It's been all or nothing. I really like what they're doing up in Minnesota. We'll see how they shape up for the rest of the year, because they are a small market team and haven't been to the promised land in a long time. Tampa Bay Rays, this is a team that it's hard to enjoy watching their games because their stadium is so hard to look at. But they have put together a decent team. Their pitching staff wasn't able to derail Minnesota's, rampaging offense. Probably says a little more than the Twins about their hitting, able to hit the ball. And I really like Tampa, but we'll just see how they shape up as a small market team coming down the stretch. I do say the rate, they have a 1.50 starter ERA in those outings. So they have a team that can pitch the ball. They're going to have to hit a lot better, I think, in the second half of the season. Chicago Cubs, the regression came earlier from John Lester, particularly in a tough state. The Cubs lefty appeared to have fully adjusted to the new velocity and the constraints of his pitching. We'll have to see how the Cubs do. I would love to see the Cubs win. A Major League best 1.16 ERA in his first 7 starts. So he gives them hope. But you want to see the Cubs stay healthy. I know they wanted to get rid of Madden not too long ago just because they were struggling. But they're always going to be a team that has the heart of America behind them. Really love seeing the Cubs play well. I look at the Milwaukee Brewers, another small market team. If there's any way they could get rid of the doldrums from the Bucks being knocked out of the NBA Finals by the Toronto Raptors, then they're going to have to do it on the pitching mound. Now, this is the team, obviously, the second return of Nelson, who's Milwaukee's ace when he's had his injured shoulder, the belly flopping into first base at Wrigley Field. That was in 2017. He's back to really good form. They have an ace in Jimmy Nelson from AAA San Antonio. They have a good opportunity. Milwaukee was knocked out by the Dodgers last year. I know they're hoping to get back there this year, at least their fans, because that's one of the great things about sports in the Midwest is people really love their teams. Maybe I won't say any more than teams on the West Coast or on the East, but when you're a Midwest team, most of those teams outside of Chicago are in small markets and outside of Detroit. So we'll see what happens with them and if they're able to turn things around. What we're going to do is take what's called the Big C pause, but I want to finish with the Philadelphia Phillies. I know this team has everything lined up to be successful. I thought they paid too much for Harper, and they thought that maybe he would get them over the hump. You look at a team that has a starting hitting of 170 in the home run in May. Markel Franco hit 7 blasts in March and April. with more walk-offs and strikeouts than anyone else on that team. So we'll see how they can shape up. I know they're going to get more out of Harper, hopefully. We'll see if that happens. The Boston Red Sox, I love what the Red Sox bring. Entering over the weekend, they had the Red Sox miserable 2 for 26. They were struggling, and we know they're struggling. I thought the bad thing that happened for them as they went 11 for 28 against the Yankees, they had to start their World Series defense of their title across the country in Seattle. They made them travel to Seattle to open the season after beating the Dodgers in the World Series, and I thought that was maybe a bad omen for them, and hoping that Boston will turn that around. But they've won enough championships in that city. I don't think they're going to be hurting if they don't get back on stride. The Atlanta Braves will finish our power rankings with the Atlanta Braves. The Braves had a short week with just 5 games, going 2-3 against the Nationals and Tigers. They continue with a favorable stretch in the next 6 games on the road against the Pirates and the Marlins, and then a 10-game homestand for the Braves. So the Braves are in good shape, and we know that they have a lot going for them. New ballpark, young team. I look forward to the Braves really making a nice turnaround after we get through, finish with the NBA All-Star game and all the talk about who's going to win that finals between the Warriors and the Raptors, and I'm looking forward to that. What we're going to do is come up on what's called a Big C pause. We're going to come back and talk more about the world of college football, because it's one of my favorite things. I think many people who played college football and did not get a chance to play pro, it was one of your last opportunities to feel that greatness of being an athlete, and I know a lot of people miss that. What we're going to do is take the Big C pause, and we'll come right back after the break. All right, we are back on what's called the Big C pause, and we're on the Big C Sports Show, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network. We have so much that we're grateful for in this great country, and as we always tell people, it's not about what you know at times, it's who you know, and knowing that you have help whenever you need it. You can follow Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Google Podcasts. You can find us on Spreaker, on Spotify. You can find Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast, on YouTube channel, which is covering the NBA Finals. But what I really like is that app. When you walk into your home, it's called Alexa. You say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll hear our sponsors, and then our show will come up. So we thank you, our sponsorship, for helping us grow. But also, it's important that I mention, if you need help, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. There's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline. If you're a teenager that's being bullied, sometimes they don't tell their parents, but they can still call and get help. 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255. Or if you like to text, a lot of teenagers want to text 838-255. That's 838-255. So if you're going through some challenges, don't try to deal with it on your own. There's always help, but you just got to reach out to ask for it. And I know sometimes if you're a veteran also and you need some help and you don't know where to turn, you just need someone that's there to help you get through some hard times. You can also reach out and call that same number. Don't wait about hoping that someone calls you first. Call them. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. You can text 838-255. That's 838-255. I know what a lot of people love. We have the National Hockey League, NHL. Everyone's trying to get to the TV sets to see who's going to win North Stanley's Cup. Will it be the Boston Bruins, or will it be the St. Louis Blues? I'm most likely, I'm not into picking teams. It would be nice to see St. Louis get a win, but it would have to be an upset. We know Boston's very strong, so no matter who you like in that, it's going to be decided on the ice. If you're also into the NBA basketball season and the finals, to me it's fantastic. I know not everybody's really into saying that, well, we want to see LeBron James and he's not there every year, can't be there every year. But I think Toronto showed up and they've really played the way we knew they could play. Again, this team, they upset a lot of people's favorite. They wanted to see Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let me say that again, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, that's easy for a lot of people to say. The Milwaukee Bucks couldn't get it done. They were knocked out by Toronto. So they've earned it. And will Kawhi Leonard stay in Toronto? They're offering him everything a man could want, but I don't know if that's enough to keep him there. But we'll see. It's just a matter of how they feel about what happens after this series is over. I would still think that Golden State has a chance to win, but it's all about who shows up and does it on the field and on the court. That's the most important thing. I know a lot of people are looking into the world of college football, and being here on the West Coast, sometimes you don't have a chance to see, some of the top teams play because they haven't had the success lately on the West Coast. But as I look at maybe some of the top 25 programs out there, and you look at their national recruits and how they rank in the world of college football, you got to look at some of the positions. When you look at the recruiting and how they get better, recruiting is important. We have All-America teams that are offensively and defensively that really turns the dial on the knob. They're chosen by media. Also, coaches have a lot to say about who's going to be the national champion or the All-America team. It's hands down that you look at Lawrence, the kid, Trevor Lawrence, out of Clemson. A lot of people loved the way he played last year in the national championship game. But Trevor, he's going to have to do it again back-to-back. The quarterback, 6'6", 215 pounds. He's only a sophomore out of Clemson. He had a great game against Alabama in the national championship game. But he wasn't really thought about as much until they won that game against the great Alabama. When you beat Alabama, you're going to make a lot of noise for yourself. There's also, for the All-American team, first team, just a choice that media's put together. And I like to go along with my own thoughts, too. I like running back Travis Etienne. He's a 5'10", 215-pound junior out of Clemson. Has cutback skills, breakaway speed. And to have him in the backfield when Lawrence needs to turn around and hand the ball off as opposed to passing all the time, I think that gives Clemson an excellent chance to get back to the bowl championship series, at least the top 4. If we go up to the big Northwest, the Midwest part of the country, you have Wisconsin. They have a solid running back. Reminds me a lot of Ron Dane back in the day. Jonathan Taylor, a 5'11", 219-pound junior for Wisconsin. Here's a guy that's going to really carry the rock for the Badgers. They're a strong running team. Not as much in the passing department, but if you're going to compete with the likes of Ohio State and Michigan, you're going to have to run the ball very well. So I really like what he brings to the backfield for the Wisconsin Badgers in Jonathan Taylor. I look at wide receivers, and you look at Jerry Jeudy. He's a 6'1", 192-pounder out of Alabama. He's not the biggest guy, but he has good hands, can catch the ball and make people miss. I know Alabama relies a lot on their defense, but their offense is the one that has to put up scores. And so having him catching the ball, I think that helps a lot. When you look at the other wide receiver, Tylan Wallace, a 6 feet, 185-pound junior out of Oklahoma State. I remember the game against Boise State last year, how Oklahoma State really had a good passing game and they passed the ball very well, gave Boise State a lot of fits in that game, and that's what, well, some people thought Boise State would beat them. But I also look at the fact that under Gundy, they have a very good passing attack down at Oklahoma State. I look at the tight end, Albert Okwuegbunam, if I said his name properly, 6'5", 255 junior out of Missouri. Missouri's in a tough spot. I know they played very good football in the SEC, but I still think of them more as a Big 8 pack, Big 12 team, just because of the terrain of Missouri and how they're on top of all the teams that are there in the Big 12. And it would be great to see them go back to that conference. I don't think they're going to compete well in the SEC. I know they had 1 year where they won their division, but they're not going to compete against like Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and Florida year after year. So them going back to the pack of the Big 12 might make sense, but I doubt it because it's too much money in the SEC conference. When you look at the center, someone has to block and snap the ball on every play. People think about the quarterbacks being the most important players, but you got to have a center that can snap the ball and also call audibles. And that's Tyler Badizzi, is 6'3", 318-pound junior out of Wisconsin, really going to help out with Jonathan Taylor, the running back at Wisconsin. So Wisconsin has put some good players up on the first team, All-America team, projectively. So I really love what they can do for the offensive line at Wisconsin. Also, you have offensive lineman Andrew Thomas. He's 6'5", 320-pound behemoth out of Georgia. A guy that can really run block and pass block as well. I think he'll be a high draft pick when it comes to his turn to seek the NFL draft. But I know you got to get there. It's not just on paper. We'll see what he can do. The other offensive lineman, Alex Leatherwood, is 6'6", 310-pound out of Alabama. I'm looking at what Alabama does every year they always have a solid defensive line. Quarterback with Tua is always great, and Hurts before him. But now you look at who keeps those quarterbacks on their feet and off their back. It's hard to throw a ball when you land on your back. And that's Leatherwood, 6'6", 310 for Alabama. He's only a junior. Most likely will finish out his senior season at Alabama. That would make him even more of a sure pick first round for the NFL. The other side of the offensive line, you look at Walker Little. He's 6'7". These kids just get bigger and bigger. Plays for David Shaw at Stanford. 6'7", 313 pounds. He's a junior at Stanford. Now, when you look at these players, they are juniors. That's where you find, outside of Lawrence, and you have one more player we're going to mention from Syracuse, but these juniors are the ones who are stayed there. They've been there through the whole program, and they have a chance to really make some noise if they're going to go to the next level and play in the NFL. I have another great offensive lineman out of Michigan, John Runyon Jr., 6'5", 310 senior, out of Michigan. Harbaugh needs a strong running game. It starts with the offensive line. I think they'll have that this year. It's just a matter of how they gel together. Everyone still has to knock off Ohio State if you're going to win that Big Ten conference. And then for the kicker, you have Andre Stimmitz, a 6'1", 186-pound sophomore from Syracuse. So those are the players that make the first team. But I want to go over to the offensive line for the second team players. It's amazing how things change in 1 year. You have the great Tua Tagovailoa at 6'1", 218-pound junior from Alabama. Remember last year when he was America's can't miss out of St. Louis High School, Honolulu, Hawaii? Everyone loved him until he had a knee injury in one of their ball games, and they kind of rushed him back in the national championship game. Didn't have as great a game as his counterpart from Clemson in Lawrence. But I still like Tua. They got to keep him healthy. Starts with the offensive line. I want to go out to the West Coast, and when you think about running back, Eno Benjamin, 5'10", 201 pounds, a junior out of Arizona State. This kid can really fly. He can run the ball very fast, shifty, and Arizona State's going to have a solid run game behind him. I think he'll bring some more attention to the Pac-12. He could be up around the 15 to 20 touchdowns if they give him enough touches per game. If he touches the ball 20 times, he has that breakaway speed. I think he'll do a lot for the Sun Devils run game. There's another great running back out there on the horizon, but he's from the East Coast. You wouldn't expect him to have it, but A.J. Dillon, a 6 feet, 250-pounder. He's a junior out of Boston College. Another one of those ACC running backs that you would expect to find guys with his speed down at schools like Clemson or maybe even Miami. But I think A.J. Dillon will do well for the running game of Boston College. I still don't think they're going to compete for any type of championship in the conference, but he should make a big name for himself this year running the ball. Wide receiver, second team. Rondale Moore, 5'9", 180 pounds, a sophomore out of Purdue. For a sophomore to be considered second team All-American, that says a lot about his skill set. I think he's a player that's obviously going to have to play into his senior season. Coming out of Purdue, a team that more well-rounded than a lot of people think. They did knock off Ohio State last year. He'll have a chance to help build on the reputation for Purdue, having a solid football team coming up this season. Another wide receiver, Creedy Lamb. You got to get touchdown, Creedy Lamb. We can't wait to hear that name. Now, he plays at Oklahoma, so you know he's going to touch the ball a lot with their passing game and quarterback Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, of course, helped Alabama win a national championship. But just like most things in life, when you have Tua come along and you get beat out, but he handled up the class, he's able to go over to Oklahoma and see if he can help get them back to the Big 12 championship game. And I think Tua has the opportunity to get that done. He should be good in the backfield for them. But you want to look at it. Creedy Lamb, 6'2", 89 junior, Oklahoma, should have a solid season coming up for the Oklahoma Sooners. There's a tight end by the name of Jared Pinkney. He's a 6'4", 255-pound senior out of Vanderbilt. So he won't get a lot of TV time because Vanderbilt doesn't crack the media a lot. A lot of people don't even care about their football program. But I do think that you got to earn it. If you can climb the ladder and be considered All-American, even if you're a second team and you're part of that SEC conference, you know he's playing some good football. Jared Pinkney, 6'4", 255, senior out of Vanderbilt, should be an NFL draft pick or at least get invited to the combines. You have the center, second team All-American, Darrell Williams, 6'2", 310 pounds. He's a senior out of Mississippi State. SEC is loaded. If you're 6'2", 310 pounds, you're a senior, you're a center out of Mississippi State, Dak Prescott's alma mater. You're going to call every play for the offensive line, just like the quarterbacks do for the whole offense. A lot of people don't realize that the center is very important in making plays and what kind of blocking schemes you're going to have. So Mississippi State should be solid with the run game, with him, Darrell Williams, hiking the ball. Now, offensive line, second team, All-American. Ben Bredeson, 6'5", 320 pounds, a senior from Michigan. Jim Harbaugh has to love him. He's always built a strong running game in Harbaugh. Even with the 49ers, had a strong running game, and he had also Alex Smith. And, of course, Colin Kaepernick came along and had the run-pass option, made that more famous in the NFL with what they called the new offense for the NFL. A lot of teams just couldn't match up against it when they hadn't seen it in a long time. And so I really look forward to that, seeing a good ground game with Mississippi State. And there's Ben Bredeson, 6'5", 320, senior from Michigan. That'll help their run game. I want to come out to the West Coast. Now, I know Big C doesn't like West Coast football. He thinks we're too finesse. The 49ers had that same moniker many years ago when they were called a finesse team and not a physical team, especially when they were being knocked out by the Giants or by the Cowboys in the playoffs. But they've shown the finesse that Bill Walsh implemented helped a lot. I think a lot of Pac-12 schools have learned that same type of finesse. You look at Shane Lemieux, he's 6'4", 317 pounds senior for Oregon. I do think Oregon will win the Pac-12 North this year, especially with their quarterback in Herbert. I think he's just an amazing quarterback. But you got to have the offensive line that can protect him, and I think he'll get that with Big Shane Lemieux, 6'4", 317. Also want to go to the Auburn offensive lineman, Prince Tia Wangohu, 6'7", 305 pounds senior. Now, Auburn plays Oregon this year down in Texas in one of the early games. We'll get to see those two players match up against each other. They're both on the offensive line, but we'll see which one does better for the run game in the Oregon versus Auburn game. I think Oregon's going to win that game also. That's just my opinion, just because their quarterback situation is a lot better, I feel, than what Auburn has. If you look at the offensive line also, we're going to stay on the West Coast with Trey Adams. Is 6'8", 306 pounds senior out of the University of Washington. Chris Peterson's really recruited well for the Pac-12. This kid had a chance to have some Rose Bowl experience under them. Also played in the game last year against Auburn. I thought Washington played well enough to win that game against Auburn last year, but there was a pick that was called on a touchdown that Washington had, and it was called back. I thought it was a way that turned the game and had it go Auburn's way. Just my opinion. I know a lot of people down south don't agree with me. When you look at the kickers, Dominic Ibry, 6'2", 195 pounds, out of Utah State. I think he's second team, and they'll call him that for a reason, only because he's in a smaller conference, but I think he's well enough to be first team if he were playing for someone like Utah instead of Utah State. I want to go to the defensive side of the ball for college football and just look at their All-Americans. For a first-team All-American based on media and coaches, defensive line, Chase Young, 6'5", 265. He's a junior out of Ohio State. The Ohio State Buckeyes are always very solid on the defensive side of the ball as well as offensively. Chase Young will keep that tradition going for the Buckeyes. Also, defensive lineman, Kenny Wilkes, 6'4", 262 pounds. He's a senior out of Michigan State, another Big Ten player. There's a lot of good linemen that will come out of the Big Ten Conference. He'll help keep Michigan State on the map. I know they were nearly knocked off last year by Utah State. They should be a little bit better this year in the opening game. Defensive line, A.J. Espenza, 6'6", 280 pounds. He's a junior out of Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes, that's a team that will most likely not win the Big Ten championship, but they're always a team that knocks someone off. 2 years ago when they knocked off Ohio State and prevented Ohio State from having the season they wanted to have. And they're always a team that they're going to play good football, but they're still one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, but they're not one of the top 2 or 3. So really looking forward to him having a good season, helping them on the D-line for Iowa. A guy that I really like, Derek Brown, 6'5", 318 pounds senior for Auburn. You'll see him in the game against Oregon. We'll see how well he plays up against Oregon's All-American as well. It's just a matter of what teams come together. Whenever you have a first game and you're playing against a team that's just as good as you never really can tell how good a player is, but you can tell how they match up against other All-Americans. some other teams really looking forward to Derek Brown playing this year for Auburn. A linebacker, when you get into the linebacker position, you talk about a guy that can cover the run and the pass. He's a big guy at 6'3", 235-pound junior from Alabama. Another one of Nick Saban's recruits. They tend to find him no matter where they come from. I think you're going to see a lot of people loving the way this guy plays football. 6'3", 235, the junior from Alabama, and Dylan Moses. Linebacker Joe Banshee, 6'2", 238, a senior out of Michigan State. Again, this team will be solid on the defensive side of the ball. The Michigan State Spartans. A linebacker that can cover the pass. He's also good against the run. He's good on the blitz. He's a senior, and he's going to be solid choice on the defensive side for the Michigan State Spartans. Linebacker Micah Parsons, 6'3", 243, a sophomore out of Penn State. If you're a sophomore and you can crack the list of being one of the All-Americans in the country, I think that says well for the Penn State Nittany Lions on the defensive side of the ball. Another stalwart for the Big Ten, but he's only a sophomore. Might be a little bit too early to put him up then All-American status, but we'll see if he stacks up to that ranking. Cornerback Paulson Adubo, 6'1", 189, a sophomore out of Stanford. Stanford has great academic players under Coach David Shaw. Also, if you're in the Pac-12, you got to be able to cover the pass. A lot of people like a strong running game, and you'll notice a lot of the teams that are playing for national championships, they have a strong pass game. So Adubo is going to have to play well for Stanford as they like to throw the ball downfield. 6'1", 189. He's only a sophomore, so we'll see if he's in over his head. If he need another year to rank up with some of the top players in the league catching the football, especially in the Pac-12. Cornerback Bryce Hall, 6'1", 200 pounds, senior out of Virginia. Again, he's a senior, so he's had the experience behind him. I really like Bryce Hall is 6'1", has a lot of height on him. Going to see a lot of passing teams this year in the ACC, especially going up against Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. We'll see if he's going to earn that second team All-American ranking, especially when they play teams like Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and also Clemson. I want to bring up a safety. Grant Dilpit, 6'3", 203 pounds, a junior out of LSU. This kid is amazing. LSU's always had some great defensive players on their side of the defensive ball, and I want to see how he stacks up against some of the other players in the SEC. Andre Cisco, he's a safety, 6 feet, 198. He's only a sophomore out of Syracuse. My personal thoughts, he might be in over his head a little bit, especially against the ACC teams that can throw the ball so well. He'll also be up against Lawrence and Clemson when they match up against each other this year. So we'll see if he holds up. You have a punter, Brendan Mann, 5'11", 195, senior out of Texas A&M. Always have to have a good kicking game, and the punters is where you change field position, so we'll see how that stacks up. Second team, all defense. I'm telling you, this kid, defensive line, Raekwon Davis, he's big enough for basketball and football at the same time, Big C. This kid is 6'7". He's 309 pounds. He's a senior out of Alabama. Another one of Nick Saban's recruits. I think he's a stopper. He's a run stopper. He can also bat down balls. So he's a player you're going to have your hands full. Most likely a double team when Raekwon Davis is on the field. 6'7", 309, a senior out of Alabama, played the national championship game last year. Second team pick this year. Defensive line, Xavier Thomas, 6'2", 260, a sophomore out of Clemson. He's a kid with championship pedigree, but he's only a sophomore. Again, sophomores to make All-American, either first or second team, might be in over their head a little bit, but we'll see if he's gotten on the list. Maybe he's earned it. Defensive line, Julian Okara, 6'5", 240, senior out of Notre Dame. Coach Kelly has really put Notre Dame on the map again, competing for at least the college championship bowl series. I know they were blown up by Clemson last year, just a little bit in over their head in that game, but that was just a bad game by Notre Dame. I don't think they were that much of a lesser team than what Clemson put on the field last year. We'll see what happens this year. Defensive line, Raekwon Williams, 6'4", 298. He's a senior out of Michigan State. I like the Spartans, what they're doing this year with their interior line offensively and defensively. I think Williams will stack up well, helping them with that run game, stopping the run game at least for the Michigan State Spartans. Linebacker, Anthony Jennings, 6'3", 259. He's a senior out of Alabama. And you wonder, people don't like Nick Saban. Not because he's not a good coach, but he gets all the great players. Even in the second team All-American. Anthony Jennings, 6'3", 259 out of Alabama. Will probably be close to about 250 come kickoff, but he's going to be solid on the defensive line for Alabama. Can run sideline to sideline. Linebacker Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 225, a junior out of Clemson. This kid can also lay the wood, can cover running backs out of the backfield as well as good on the blitz. Linebacker Patty Fisher, 6'4", 241 junior out of Northwestern. Another kid from the Big Ten that's going to help shore up their run game. I like cornerback C.J. Henderson, 6'1", 191, a junior out of Florida. The SEC is loaded with a lot of players that are first team and second team All-Americans. I really love what they're doing down in the SEC, as they always have better athletes, it seems. Maybe just because that part of the country, the weather is more conducive to having great players. Cornerback Cameron Dantzler, 6'2", 185 junior out of Mississippi State. Another SEC pick and second team All-American. This kid also is good at cornerback, can cover one-on-one, doesn't need a lot of help. At Mississippi State, he's really going to help that defense down south. Safety, Caden Stearns, 6'1", 210, a sophomore from Texas. Now, if you're a sophomore again, I really don't think sophomores can measure the mustard, but we'll see down in Texas. They have so many good athletes on the Texas Longhorns this year. But if he can make first team as a sophomore and also be considered for an All-American, even though it's second team, I think it says a lot about the staff they'll have down in Texas and the team they'll have this year. Another safety, this kid's a stud, J.R. Reed, 6'1", 194-pound senior. Played for Georgia, saw him last year in the game against Texas, down in the Sugar Bowl, down in Arlington. We'll see if they have enough to get back this year. But when you look at Stearns and also Reed, Stearns out of Texas and then Reed out of Georgia, this is a good matchup. Those two players, they look identical it seems, and we'll see which one can help lead their team, if possible, to at least a conference championship or a conference bowl games. We'll finish out with punter James Smith, 6'5", 225, a junior out of Cincinnati. Obviously, you're not going to be on TV a lot if you're playing at Cincinnati, but that's just a look at some of the All-Americans, first team and second team, and again, voted on by coaches and players, media alike. I wish all the kids the best. You got to stay healthy. We know that's always important. So I want to tell you, we always appreciate covering the world of college football. I know we're in the heart of baseball season. We're in the heart of the NBA Finals. We're in the heart of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. And really appreciate just paying attention also to what's going on in the world of the NFL. But college football is just as exciting, and it's a mainstay of sports that you can count on as much as any other sport out there. You can follow Big C Sports every Monday through Friday at 5 to 6 p.m. worldwide on iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on iTunes, on Spreaker, on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, as well as they're covering the NBA Finals. If you have Xfinity Comcast, you can find Big C Sports on television as well. And then if I really like the app called Alexa. If you walk into your house, you say, Alexa, please play Big C Sports Podcast. You don't have to say please, but sometimes she says thank you. But say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You hear our sponsors come up, and then you'll hear the show Big C Sports come up. Going solo today, Big C Sports doing some traveling. Big C down south. Also, I want to say to all of our veterans, we're just had Doomsday, all the celebrations going on around the great country of the United States of America and in Europe. Just want to say thank you to all of our veterans. But if you're a veteran or even a youngster and you're having some problems, you need to reach out and get some help. There's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255. Or a lot of teenagers, they want to text, and if they're having problems, sometimes they don't tell their parents. You can text 838-255, that's 838-255, and hopefully you can get some help. We don't want to see anyone have problems, especially when there's help out there. So for all the fans that are listening to sports talk all over the country, we just want to say again to our veterans, we can't thank you enough. In the families of veterans, they go through it also. So our thoughts and prayers are with all of you, especially with Big C Sports. As we always say, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Bundini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. And he would always say to Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. And as I always say, Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe? I know we're looking forward to a great Stanley Cup final, looking forward to a great NBA final, and we hope that you will enjoy it too every Monday through Friday, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, as we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you, on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.